I never imagined that saying yes to my sister would change my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. Clara had always been the one everyone looked up to, confident and charming, but behind that smile was a struggle she never talked about. She couldn't have children. I remember the day she asked me to carry her baby. I froze. It felt like someone had asked me to give away a piece of my own life. My heart hurt for her, but fear and doubt filled me too. What if something went wrong? What if it changed my relationship with her forever? But seeing the pain in her eyes, I couldn't refuse. I agreed. I told myself it was just for love, just for family, and that everything would turn out fine. In the beginning, it felt like the right choice. I went through all the medical appointments, the tests, the injections, and I kept thinking about the happiness it would bring Clara. I tried to convince myself that everything I was sacrificing didn't matter because it was for her dream. Still, from the very beginning, I noticed small things that didn't feel right. Clara would make comments about how much I was eating, how I was moving, how I spent my day. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself she was just stressed about the process, worried about the pregnancy, and that I should be patient. But deep down, a little voice in my mind told me that there was something more controlling in her words, something I couldn't ignore. Even as the pregnancy progressed, I kept reminding myself why I said yes. I thought about the moment Clara would hold her baby in her arms, the joy she would feel, and the bond she would finally have. I tried to stay positive, but those little comments, those moments when she seemed more concerned about her own plans than my well-being, they lingered. I wanted to believe that it was all part of her stress, part of the pressure she had been under for so many years, and I told myself I was overthinking. I didn't want to ruin our relationship. I loved Clara, and I wanted to make her dream come true. But even as I tried to convince myself that everything was fine, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was building beneath the surface, something I couldn't yet name. I just didn't know that agreeing to carry her baby wasn't just about helping her. It would become the turning point of my entire life, a choice that would test my heart, my strength, and my trust in ways I never expected. Little did I know, the journey that started with love and sacrifice would soon take me through heartbreak, betrayal, and lessons I would never forget. And it all began with a promise I thought I could keep, a promise made out of loyalty and hope. As the weeks went by, the pregnancy became real in ways I hadn't expected. My body was changing, and every appointment, every test reminded me that I was carrying a life that wasn't technically mine. Clara's excitement was obvious, but so was her need to control every detail. She would insist on specific foods, tell me exactly when to rest, and constantly check on how I was feeling. At first, I thought it was just concern, but it quickly felt like more, like she wanted to oversee every single part of my life. Derek, Clara's husband, was quieter than usual. He smiled, asked polite questions, but there was something in the way he avoided eye contact, the way he lingered just a little too long when Clara wasn't looking. I couldn't put my finger on it, but my instincts told me that not everything was as simple as it seemed. I found myself giving up things I had always enjoyed. Nights out with friends disappeared, weekend trips were cancelled, even my work hours had to be adjusted so I could focus entirely on the pregnancy. It wasn't just physical sacrifice, it was my personal life, my freedom, my dreams. I was putting everything aside for Clara's happiness. And yet, the more I gave, the more Clara seemed to take it for granted. One evening, she made a comment that stuck with me. She said, "I know this is a lot of extra work for you, but don't worry, it's worth it." The words sounded small, almost innocent, but the tone carried something else, something dismissive, almost like she was reminding me that I was indebted, that I owed her. I forced a smile, but inside, I felt a flicker of unease. That night, I called my best friend, Lily. I didn't want to worry anyone unnecessarily, but I needed someone to hear me. "I don't know, Lily," I admitted. "It's like Clara is changing. I feel like she's watching me all the time, and Derek. I can't explain it, but something feels off." Lily listened quietly and told me to trust my instincts, to pay attention to how I felt. Her words comforted me, but they also made me more aware that the situation wasn't as simple as helping my sister. The pregnancy that should have been a joyful experience for all of us was becoming complicated. Every day, I felt the tension growing, like a quiet storm building under the surface. I kept reminding myself why I agreed to this, why I was sacrificing so much, but there were moments when I questioned whether my love and loyalty were being respected, or whether I was walking into something much darker than I had imagined. Even in the early stages, the trust one had in Clara and Derek began to feel fragile. Something was shifting, and I could feel it in the small gestures, the subtle words, the way they both looked at me sometimes. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I had a sinking feeling that this pregnancy, which I had accepted out of love, was slowly becoming the start of a storm I couldn't ignore. One afternoon, while Clara thought I was in the kitchen, I overheard her voice in the living room. At first, I didn't mean to listen, but the tone made me stop. Derek's voice joined hers, low and serious. I froze as I realized they were talking about me, not in concern, not about the pregnancy, but about how to handle me after the baby was born. "They've done their part," Clara said. "We don't need to involve her anymore. It's easier if she just steps aside once Sophia arrives." My heart dropped. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Every sacrifice I had made, every moment I had given up, every sleepless night, every worry about my own health, they had been planning to cast me aside as if I were nothing. Derek's voice followed, calm but with an edge. "I know. We'll make sure it looks fair. She won't see it coming." I felt frozen in place. Betrayal doesn't always hit immediately, but this was sharp, deep, and cutting. I had trusted them, helped them, carried their baby out of love for my sister, and they were planning to treat me like I didn't matter. The feeling of being used, of being discarded, made my chest tighten, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Later, when I was alone in the bedroom, the tears came. I didn't try to stop them. I cried for the unfairness of it all, for the way my love and loyalty had been twisted into a tool for someone else's convenience. I cried for the sleepless nights I had endured, the friends I hadn't seen, the life I had paused for their happiness. I cried because I had believed in them, and they had betrayed me in the most personal way possible. But as the tears fell, a different feeling started to rise inside me. Anger, sharp and clear, replaced some of the sadness. I realized that I didn't have to be powerless in this. I had given them my trust, yes, but I still had my mind, my courage, and my strength. If they thought they could treat me like a pawn, they were wrong. I began to think about what I could do, how I could protect myself and the baby, and how I could make sure that Clara and Derek didn't get away with using me. It wasn't about revenge at first, it was about justice, about making sure that the sacrifices I had made were not erased, that the life I had carried and the effort I had given weren't taken for granted. By the time the crying stopped, a plan was forming in my mind. I would stay calm, keep my composure, and wait for the right moment. They had underestimated me, assumed my loyalty made me weak, but they didn't know how determined I could be when I was protecting something that mattered. The betrayal had lit a fire inside me, and I knew that things would never be the same again. I would find a way to make sure that their plans didn't succeed, not without consequences. The pregnancy wasn't easy. One evening, I started feeling sharp pains and dizziness. My heart raced as I realized something might be seriously wrong. I rushed to the hospital, terrified, hoping Clara would be worried, hoping she would show even a little care. But when I called her, her voice was distant, almost annoyed. "Don't worry so much," she said. "It's probably nothing. You're overreacting." I couldn't believe it. In that moment, I felt completely alone. Derek, on the other hand, seemed different. He stayed by my side, held my hand, and tried to calm me down. He asked questions, offered support, and seemed genuinely concerned. But I couldn't trust the warmth in his gestures. After what I had overheard, every kind word from him felt like a puzzle I couldn't solve. Did he really care, or was it part of whatever plan they had? I felt torn and confused, unsure who to trust. The experience shook me to the core. I began to question everything about Clara and Derek, about who truly cared for me and who only used me. Every small word, every little gesture from them now felt loaded with hidden meaning. I couldn't ignore that betrayal, and I couldn't let myself be vulnerable again. I realized I had to take control in a way I hadn't before. That night, I started keeping a record. I wrote down Clara's controlling words, the subtle criticisms, the moments where she tried to make me feel guilty or inferior. I noted Derek's odd behaviors, the times I felt confused by him, the moments that didn't add up. I even documented appointments, conversations, and little incidents that could prove useful later. It felt strange at first, writing down every slight and every manipulation, but it gave me a sense of control I desperately needed. The fear and heartbreak I had been feeling slowly shifted into determination. I couldn't change what Clara had done, and I couldn't undo the betrayal, but I could protect myself and the baby. I promised myself that nothing would be taken from me, not my health, not my dignity, not the right to have a say in what happened next. I realized that my love for Clara and my desire to help her had to coexist with a firm boundary. Sacrificing myself blindly would no longer be an option. Every pang of pain, every moment of doubt, every tear I shed became fuel for the strength I needed. I knew the journey ahead would be difficult, but I also knew that I had to fight, not just for me, but for the life I was carrying. By the time I went to bed that night, the fear had not disappeared, but a quiet resolve had taken its place. I was no longer just the sister carrying a baby for someone else. I was a mother, a protector, and a woman who would not allow betrayal to define her life. Something inside me had changed, and for the first time I felt ready to face whatever came next. I didn't realize how much I needed support until Rachel stepped in. She's my cousin, someone I've trusted since childhood, and she noticed the strain on me before I even spoke a word. One afternoon, over coffee at her place, I told her everything, about the controlling behavior, the betrayal I had overheard, and the confusion I felt with Derek. She listened quietly, nodding, never judging, just understanding. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. Rachel was quick to see the danger I was in. "Emma," she said gently but firmly, "Clara can't be trusted. She's already planning to cut you out once the baby is born. You need to be careful, but you also need a plan." I froze at her words. I had suspected it, but hearing it aloud made it real. Clara wasn't just being controlling, she had a plan, and it didn't include me. We started talking about what I could do. I couldn't fight Clara legally while still pregnant, the system didn't favor surrogates in my position. But Rachel reminded me that the moment Sophia was born, things could change. We went over options, what documents I could keep, what proof I could gather, and how I could assert my rights once I held my daughter. It wasn't easy to think so far ahead, but I realized that planning now was my only way to protect both myself and Sophia. Even as I followed our plan, I had to act carefully. I started making small moves around the house, keeping copies of medical documents, noting interactions that showed Clara's manipulations, and paying attention to Derek's actions. Every small observation became part of a bigger picture I was quietly building. I knew that rushing or confronting Clara now could backfire, so I focused on preparation and caution. The tension in the house grew as I maintained this careful balance. Clara continued to act as if everything was normal, smiling, talking, and giving instructions, but I felt stronger. The knowledge that Rachel was by my side gave me courage I hadn't realized I had. I began to see that I didn't have to be powerless. I could protect myself and Sophia without letting them suspect my intentions. Even with the careful planning, my heart ached at times. It was painful to think that the sister I had trusted, the one I had sacrificed so much for, had so little concern for me. But the support from Rachel reminded me that love and loyalty weren't absent from the world, they just had to be chosen wisely. By the time I went to bed that night, I felt a quiet determination settling in. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was preparing. Every small action, every note, every observation was a step toward regaining control, toward ensuring that when the baby arrived, I could protect what mattered most. For the first time since this all began, I felt ready to face the challenges ahead, not alone, but with someone who truly had my back. Rachel knew just the right person to help. She introduced me to a lawyer who specialized in family law and surrogacy cases. During our first meeting, the lawyer gently explained that, even as a surrogate, I had certain rights in our state. It wasn't much while I was still pregnant, but once the baby was born, those rights could make a huge difference. For the first time, I realized that the law could be on my side if I prepared carefully. Meanwhile, Clara's behavior became harder to ignore. She tried even harder to control me, criticizing my every move and subtly warning me against seeing friends or speaking to family about the pregnancy. She acted like she was protecting me, but I knew better. Her words were meant to isolate me, to make me dependent and easier to manipulate. It stung, but it also strengthened my resolve. I knew I couldn't let her cut off my support system. I began gathering evidence, quietly documenting everything. I wrote down every instance of Clara's controlling behavior, noting times she belittled me or tried to shame me. I kept track of Derek's odd behavior too, moments when he seemed distracted, secretive, or too friendly in ways that didn't feel right. Every note, every detail, felt like building armor around myself and the baby. At the same time, I started thinking about life after the birth. I couldn't stay in that house forever, and I couldn't trust Clara or Derek to respect my choices. I made plans quietly, looking at apartments, budgeting, and thinking about work and childcare. It was scary to imagine starting over, but it also gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt before. For the first time, I was planning for my independence, not just surviving in someone else's plan. Even though I had to keep everything secret, there was a sense of hope in my actions. Each small step, documenting, observing, preparing, was a piece of the puzzle that could protect me and Sophia. I learned to stay calm and composed around Clara, hiding my true intentions, while quietly building a safety net for both of us. The emotional weight of what I was doing was heavy. Every day reminded me that I was carrying a child, sacrificing for a family member, and yet, I had to fight for my own future at the same time. It was exhausting, but the thought of protecting Sophia and taking back control gave me strength. By the end of that week, I felt more prepared than ever. Clara could continue her manipulations, but they wouldn't stop me. I had a plan, I had support, and I had the determination to reclaim my life once Sophia arrived. For the first time since agreeing to carry the baby, I felt a quiet confidence. I wasn't just a pawn in their game anymore, I was ready to take charge of what was rightfully mine. The day Sophia was born, I felt a mixture of relief and joy I hadn't expected. Holding her for the first time, seeing her tiny fingers and hearing her soft cries, I felt an overwhelming love that made all the fear, the stress, and the pain worth it. But the moment that joy should have been shared with my sister, Clara's true colors became clear. She entered the hospital room with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Almost immediately, she tried to take control. "Emma, remember, legally Sophia is mine," she said sharply, as if reminding me I had no say at all. My heart sank. After everything I had sacrificed, after every sleepless night and every painful injection, she was already trying to cut me out, claiming ownership over the very child I had carried for 9 months. Derek hovered quietly in the background, his avoidance of the confrontation clear. I realized then that the alliance I had suspected had shifted completely. Clara had him under her control, or perhaps he had chosen sides long ago. Either way, I couldn't rely on him, and the weight of that betrayal hit me harder than ever. But I was ready. All those weeks of documenting, observing, and preparing gave me a quiet strength. I calmly laid out my notes, showing every manipulation, every controlling word, and even highlighting legal points the lawyer had advised me about. I explained, clearly and firmly, that while Clara might assume she had full rights, the law recognized my involvement as a surrogate and my ability to protect the child's welfare. Clara's expression shifted from confident to shocked in seconds. She had expected me to be passive, to give up Sophia without a fight. She hadn't counted on my preparation, my determination, or the fact that I wasn't afraid to stand my ground. Her attempts to dominate the situation fell flat, leaving her off balance and exposed. As I held Sophia close, Clara's words lost their power. I realized that the child in my arms wasn't just a baby, she was proof of my courage, my strength, and my ability to take control when I needed it most. Derek's silence made it clear he had underestimated me too, and the balance in the room had shifted. For the first time, I felt the weight of victory. It wasn't about punishing Clara or Derek, though they had caused me pain. It was about protecting Sophia and asserting the rights that were mine. The shock on Clara's face as she realized I wasn't a passive player was almost satisfying, a moment of justice born from careful preparation and unwavering resolve. That day, holding Sophia, I understood something important. The baby I carried had brought me more than joy. She had brought me clarity and power, showing me that even in the face of betrayal and manipulation, I could fight for what was right. And fight I did, quietly, firmly, and with every ounce of strength I had. After the birth, I knew I couldn't rely on Clara or Derek to do the right thing, so I moved quickly. With Rachel's help and the guidance of the lawyer, I filed for my legal rights as Sophia's surrogate. When Clara found out, her face fell. She hadn't expected me to take action so decisively, and Derek didn't step in either. The temporary custody order was granted almost immediately, giving me the authority to make decisions for Sophia while the legal process continued. Clara didn't take it lightly. She tried every trick she knew, from pleading and guilt-tripping to threatening subtle consequences, all designed to make me back down. But this time I remained calm. I listened to her words without reacting, keeping control over my emotions. I realized that letting her manipulate me would only weaken my position. Every attempt she made to intimidate me only reminded me why I had to stay strong, for myself and for Sophia. I also realized I could use the situation to reveal the truth to others. Quietly, I shared evidence of Clara's manipulations and controlling behavior with family members she trusted, showing them the reality she had tried to hide. I spoke honestly about Derek's distant and secretive actions, giving context that Clara had carefully hidden. People who had admired Clara began to see her differently, questioning her intentions and her treatment of me. It wasn't mean-spirited revenge, but it was effective. The social shift was immediate. Clara, who had once been the center of attention, now found herself isolated. People I had expected to support her began keeping their distance, unsure of her character. For the first time, she experienced the same loneliness and scrutiny she had made me feel for months. Meanwhile, I focused on Sophia, making sure her needs came first. Every decision I made reinforced my position and reminded me that this wasn't just about winning a fight, it was about fairness, dignity, and protection. Seeing Clara struggle to maintain her image while I quietly reclaimed control gave me a strange sense of satisfaction, a quiet justice for all the emotional pain she had caused me. Through it all, I felt a sense of empowerment that I hadn't known I was capable of. Betrayal had been painful, but it had also taught me the importance of preparation, patience, and standing firm. By remaining calm, documenting everything, and using intelligence over anger, I was able to protect Sophia and assert my rights in a way that Clara and Derek could never ignore. By the time the dust began to settle, Clara's position had weakened socially and legally, and I had gained clarity about my own strength. What had started as a sacrifice turned into a statement: I would not allow betrayal to define my life, and I would ensure that justice, however slow, would be served in the end. After the legal battles began to settle, I finally had space to breathe. Rachel helped me find a small apartment where Sophia and I could start fresh. It wasn't big, but it was ours. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't realized I was missing. Every detail, from decorating Sophia's room to arranging daily routines, reminded me that this life was mine to shape. Derek tried reaching out at first, sending messages and calling, hinting that he wanted to make things right. But I knew better. I remembered the betrayal, the secrecy, and the lack of care he had shown. When he showed up one afternoon, I listened calmly, then politely but firmly told him no. I wasn't interested in reconciliation. My priority was Sophia and my own peace, not giving him a chance to complicate my life further. That moment, standing strong and refusing to be manipulated, felt empowering in a way I hadn't expected. Rachel continued to be my anchor. She visited often, helped with Sophia, and provided honest advice when I doubted myself. Her presence reminded me that family could be more than the people who hurt you, it could be the people who choose to support you. With her help, I slowly rebuilt my confidence, balancing motherhood, work, and personal time. I returned to my career with renewed focus. Work became more than just a job, it was a reminder that I could succeed on my own, that I didn't need Clara or Derek's approval to define my worth. I pursued small projects I had put off during the pregnancy and took steps toward long-term goals I had once abandoned. The independence felt incredible. I was no longer defined by sacrifice or manipulation, I was creating a life built on my own terms. Evenings at home became a source of calm. Watching Sophia grow, hearing her laugh, and seeing her milestones reminded me of why I had fought so hard. Every smile, every hug, every quiet moment of bedtime storytelling strengthened my sense of purpose. I realized that courage wasn't just standing up to Clara and Derek, it was choosing to live fully despite the past. Looking back, I understood that the greatest rewards weren't revenge or legal victories, they were the lessons I had learned about self-worth, intelligence, and resilience. Carrying Sophia had been challenging, and the betrayal had been painful, but those experiences shaped me into a stronger, wiser person. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my freedom, and no one could take that away. In those quiet moments, holding Sophia close and thinking about how far we had come, I felt a deep sense of peace. I knew that life could still bring challenges, but I was ready. I had the strength, the support, and the courage to face whatever came next. And in that, I found happiness I hadn't thought possible, built entirely on my own terms. Looking back, I could see the full weight of everything I had been through. The months of sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the emotional pain, and the constant manipulation, it all came together to shape who I had become. I had entered this journey wanting only to help my sister, but I had learned lessons I could never have imagined. Betrayal had cut deep, but it had also revealed my own strength, resilience, and determination. Clara eventually tried to make peace, sending messages and showing up with apologies, as if a few words could erase months of control and betrayal. But I had changed. I calmly and firmly refused, knowing that forgiveness didn't mean letting her back into my life. She had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. In a quiet way, I felt the balance of karma settle itself. Clara faced the consequences of her actions, the distance she created between herself and our extended family, the loss of trust, and the realization that her manipulations had left her isolated. Motherhood became my true focus. Every day with Sophia reminded me that the most important battles are the ones we fight for those we love. I embraced her fully, learning to navigate her needs, her little quirks, and the joy she brought into my life. I had been afraid I would never feel the kind of love I had hoped to give, but in her, I found a connection that was stronger than any hardship I had faced. The challenges I had faced made me wiser. I no longer doubted my instincts or second-guessed my decisions. I had learned how to protect myself, how to plan carefully, and how to stay strong even when those closest to me failed. Those lessons became a part of me, shaping the mother, woman, and person I had become. Every tear, every moment of fear, every pang of betrayal had built the foundation of my resilience. Holding Sophia one evening, I realized the full meaning of what I had accomplished. I had carried a life for someone else, and in the process, I had carried my own strength even further. I had survived manipulation, betrayal, and the uncertainty of legal battles, and I had come out stronger, calmer, and more determined than ever. That feeling, the knowledge that nothing could take away my dignity or my love for Sophia, was irreplaceable. And as I looked down at her tiny hands and thought about everything we had endured together, I wondered if others could have done the same. Could anyone else have stayed patient, strategic, and strong in the face of such deep betrayal? Could they have protected the child, reclaimed their independence, and still kept their heart open to love? I smiled, knowing the answer was personal. I carried her baby, but I carried my own strength even further. And nothing, not even betrayal, could take that away.